Welcome back to English Podcast 2.0. Today we're going on a deep dive into something that I know a lot of you struggle with, understanding native English speakers when they talk fast, especially in movies and TV shows. What if you could watch without subtitles and still get every word?
It can feel impossible sometimes, especially when you're just starting out, but believe me, it's a skill you can develop with the right approach.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What's the first thing we need to know? Where do we even begin?
Well, the first thing to understand is that spoken English isn't just about individual words. It's about how those words connect and flow together. Think of it like music. There's a rhythm and a melody to spoken language.
So it's not enough to just learn the words. We have to learn the music too.
Exactly. And one of the biggest secrets to unlocking that music is understanding a phenomenon called connected speech. This is where native speakers link, morph, and even drop sounds to create a smooth flow.
I've definitely noticed that. Sometimes it feels like the words are all jumbled together.
It can sound that way at first, but once you start to recognize the patterns, it becomes much easier to decipher.
Can you give us an example of what you mean?
Absolutely. Let's take a simple phrase like, at the end of the day. A native speaker might pronounce this as, a thinned off the day. It's still the same phrase, but the sounds have blended together.
That makes sense. So how do we actually start training our ears to hear these connections?
One effective technique is to focus on specific sound changes. For example, listen for how T sounds often become a soft D sound when they come between vowels, like in water bottle.
Okay, so I should listen for those specific changes. But it's still hard to keep up when the actors are speaking quickly.
That's where the next step comes in, breaking down movies or shows into smaller, more manageable chunks. Instead of trying to watch a whole film without subtitles, start with a single scene.
So like, pick a 5-minute scene and really dissect it.
Exactly. Watch it with subtitles first to get the gist, then try it without. Focus on identifying those connected speech patterns we talked about.
This makes so much sense. I feel like I always get overwhelmed when I try to watch a whole movie without subtitles.
It's like trying to learn a song by listening to the whole thing at once. It's much easier to break it down into verses and choruses.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So let's say I've picked my scene, and I'm starting to hear those connected speech patterns. What's next?
This might sound strange, but try to become an actor. Not literally, of course, but try to embody the way native speakers use their voices.
What do you mean, like put on a fake accent?
Not at all. It's about tuning into the music of English. The intonation, the stress patterns, the rhythm. Pay attention to how actors use their voices to convey emotion, emphasis, and meaning.
So it's about imitating the way they speak, almost like you're shadowing them.
Exactly. Try to mirror their pronunciation, their pauses, the way they raise and lower their voices.
I can see how that would help. It's like learning a dance. You have to feel the rhythm in your body.
Precisely. And just like learning a dance, it takes practice. The more you listen and mimic, the more natural it will become.
Speaking of practice, I think it's really important to choose material that you actually enjoy. It makes the whole process so much more fun.
Absolutely. Finding movies or shows that you're passionate about can make a huge difference. When you're genuinely engaged with the content, you're more likely to absorb the language naturally.
I remember when I first started learning English, I became obsessed with the show Psych. The characters were so funny and quirky, and their fast-paced dialogue really pushed me to improve my listening skills.
That's fantastic. It's like finding those English parents who guide you on your language journey.
Exactly. They show you the ropes, introduce you to new words and expressions, and help you develop your own unique voice in English.
And it doesn't feel like studying at all, right? It's like hanging out with friends who just happen to speak English.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot where learning and entertainment intersect. But I have to be honest, I still get a little intimidated by the thought of watching without subtitles.
That's completely normal. It's a big step, and it can feel scary at first. But remember, you don't have to go cold turkey. Start small.
What do you suggest?
Choose a short scene, maybe one you've already watched with subtitles. Then challenge yourself to watch it without subtitles. Even if you don't understand everything, you'll be surprised by how much you can pick up from the context, the visuals, and the actors' expressions.
That's encouraging. So it's about taking that leap of faith, trusting myself, and just diving in.
Exactly. It's like jumping into a pool. It might feel scary at first, but once you're in, you realize you can swim.
I love that analogy. So are you ready for a challenge?
Bring it on! I'm always up for a good language workout.
Perfect. Let's test our listening skills with a scene from the movie Gladiator. It's a powerful moment where the main character, Maximus, reveals his true identity.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's hear it. Welcome back to English Podcast 2.0. I am so excited to continue our deep dive into understanding fast-talking native English speakers.
I feel like we are really making progress already.
We are. And remember, this journey is all about consistency and enjoying the process.
You've given us some fantastic strategies so far. But, I know there's always more to learn. What other secrets are you ready to reveal?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people think that listening is a passive activity. But when it comes to understanding fast speech, you have to be an active listener.
Active listening. That sounds intriguing.
It is. It means engaging with what you're hearing, not just letting the words wash over you.
So it's about more than just hearing the words. What else should we be paying attention to?
Think about it this way. When you watch a movie, you don't just focus on the dialogue, right? You're also paying attention to the actor's expressions, the music, the overall mood. It's the same with spoken English. Pay attention to the speaker's tone of voice, their body language, the context of the conversation.
So it's like becoming a detective. You're looking for clues to help you understand the bigger picture.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to train yourself to be an active listener is to practice paraphrasing. After you listen to a sentence or a short segment, try to rephrase it in your own words. This forces you to really process the information and make sure you've understood it.
That's a great tip. I'm definitely going to try that. So we've talked about connected speech, active listening, and finding material you love. What else can we do to build our confidence?
This might seem obvious, but vocabulary is key. The more words you know, the easier it will be to understand what you hear.
I know, vocabulary is so important. But with so many words in the English language, where do we even begin?
Start by focusing on high-frequency words. These are the words that native speakers use most often in everyday conversations.
That makes sense. So if we can master those common words, we'll be able to understand a larger portion of what we hear.
Exactly. And don't just focus on memorizing definitions. Try to learn how those words are actually used in different contexts.
Right, because sometimes a word can have multiple meanings depending on the situation.
Exactly. And the more you expose yourself to authentic English, the more you'll start to pick up on those subtle nuances.
Okay, so we've got connected speech, active listening, vocabulary expansion, and choosing content we love. I feel like we're building a pretty solid foundation here.
We are. And speaking of foundations, let's talk about idioms.
Oh, yes. Idioms, those quirky expressions that don't always translate literally, they can be so tricky.
They can, but they're also a really important part of natural English conversation. If you want to understand native speakers, you need to understand their idioms.
Any tips for tackling idioms?
Think of them as visual metaphors. Try to picture the image the idiom is trying to convey. For example, raining cats and dogs.
That's a good one. You wouldn't actually expect felines and canines falling from the sky.
Exactly. It's a colorful way to describe heavy rain.
So it's about looking beyond the literal meaning and trying to understand the image or the feeling behind the words.
Precisely. And the more you expose yourself to idioms, the more you'll start recognizing them and understanding their meaning in context.
It's like learning a secret code. Once you know the key, you can unlock a whole new level of understanding.
I love that analogy. And speaking of secret codes, let's talk about another challenge that many English learners face: accents.
Oh yes, the wonderful world of English accents. From British to Australian, American to Canadian, there's a whole symphony of sounds to explore.
And each accent comes with its unique rhythm, intonation, and even vocabulary variations.
It can feel like learning a whole new language sometimes.
It can. But instead of seeing it as a barrier, try to embrace the diversity. Expose yourself to different accents by watching movies, listening to podcasts, or even talking to people from various English-speaking backgrounds.
So the more we listen to different accents, the better our ears will become at recognizing the patterns and variations.
Exactly. It's like training your ears to be multilingual within the English language itself.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like we've uncovered so many valuable strategies.
We have, but remember, this is a journey, not a destination.
That's a great reminder. There will be days when we feel like we're making progress and days when we feel stuck.
Exactly, and that's okay. The most important thing is to keep practicing, keep challenging ourselves, and most importantly, keep enjoying the process.
I couldn't agree more. So what's next on our agenda?
Let's delve into the world of Mark. Welcome back to English Podcast 2.0. It feels like we've covered so much ground already in our quest to understand fast-talking native speakers.
We have, but Have we really covered everything? What about, like when you walk into a conversation and they're already in the middle of it?
Yes, that's a great point. And it brings us to our next secret weapon, context.
Context. I know that word.
Yeah.
But how does it apply to understanding fast speech?
Okay, so think about it this way. You walk into a room and hear someone say, "It's raining cats and dogs out there." You don't actually expect to see animals falling from the sky, right?
Of course not.
Oh, right.
I know it just means it's raining heavily.
Exactly. You're using context, the situation, the common knowledge about weather to understand the meaning. And it's the same with fast speech. Even if you miss a few words here and there, you can often figure out the meaning based on what's happening around you, the speaker's tone of voice, and the words you did catch.
So it's like filling in the gaps, using the clues around us to make sense of what we're hearing.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the better you'll become at using context to your advantage. It's like anything, right? Practice makes perfect.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Are there any other strategies we can use to kind of boost our comprehension?
Yes. Have you ever heard of shadowing?
Shadowing. That sounds kind of mysterious.
It is a little bit, or at least it sounds like that, but really it's a technique where you basically mimic a native speaker. So you listen to a recording and try to speak along with them as closely as possible, matching their pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm.
Oh, okay. So it's like synchronized speaking,
Right.
but with an English-speaking partner.
Precisely. It might feel strange at first, but it's a really effective way to improve your pronunciation and get a feel for that natural flow of English speech.
I can see how that would be helpful. You're basically training your mouth to make the same sounds.
Exactly. And here's a bonus tip. Record yourself while you're shadowing, then listen back and see how you did. It can help you identify areas where you need to work on your pronunciation.
That's a great idea. And it's like having a personal language coach in your pocket,
Mm-hmm.
which actually reminds me of something you said earlier, how learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that. We've got to pace ourselves and not get discouraged, when we hit those inevitable bumps in the road.
Exactly. Be kind to yourself, celebrate your progress, and remember that every step you take brings you closer to your goal.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like we've unlocked so many secrets to understanding fast-talking native speakers.
We have. And the best part is that these strategies are not just for understanding fast speech. They're for mastering the English language as a whole.
That's so true. This has been such an empowering episode. I feel more confident than ever about tackling those tricky English accents and fast-paced dialogues.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, the most important thing is to enjoy the process. Learning a language should be fun and rewarding.
I completely agree. Thanks for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine.
That's it for this episode of English Podcast 2.0. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into understanding fast-talking native English speakers.
Remember to keep practicing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep the English adventure alive.